challenge to despotism, up to and including its overthrow, is not just our right, but the living, breathing obligation of every honest man and woman. Trial by jury, by which we, the people, decide the justice or not of legislation, is our only defence against tyranny. It's our only defence.
Keir Starmer's new plan kills jury trials. Are you ready to lose the last shield between you and tyranny?
Where people are commanded to ignore what their own consciences might be telling them, what their own innate morality is telling them, and simply to obey the order. I shouldn't have to remind anyone, least of all members of the establishment, the judiciary especially, that the defence of only obeying orders was supposedly done away with as part of the judgment of the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II. I shouldn't have to remind anyone, but trial by jury sounds dry and dull, doesn't it? To prevent that hellish state of affairs, which is only obeying orders, which is textbook despotism in which an administration makes itself all-powerful and beyond challenge, and in which the people are made slaves, we are supposed by ancient right to have the protection made of trial by jury. Trial by jury empowers that little parliament to decide if any given piece of legislation has the right to exist at all. Consider this scenario. Imagine an administration, a government if you will, passes legislation making it illegal for a man to wear green trousers on a Friday. A man is duly brought to court, accused of breaching the legislation. The evidence is put before the jury. Among other things, CCTV, clearly showing the accused in green trousers, in footage, date stamped as a Friday. Furthermore, the man admits that he did indeed wear green trousers on a Friday. The evidence makes plain the man has broken the green trousers law. The jury, however, fully understanding the evidence, nonetheless declares the man is innocent. They've considered the matter, each man and woman using only his or her own conscience, and decided unanimously that the man is innocent. And furthermore, and this is the really important bit, furthermore, that the green trousers legislation is nonsense and should be disregarded. In point of fact, trial by jury, as originally instituted, had no truck whatever with majority. On the contrary, a real trial by jury required only one juror of 12 or 15 or whatever to return a not guilty verdict. And then that was the verdict of the whole jury. Because majority is mob rule, remember? The fact is that for centuries, literally centuries, the so-called establishment has been busily and slyly whittling away at trial by jury, which is to say, busily and slyly whittling away at the people's immune system, the ancient system set in place long ago by wiser, more benevolent heads than theirs, specifically to protect the people from despotism. By now, we have the abomination of majority verdicts. We have the abomination of magistrates' courts. Most insidious of all, we have juries browbeaten by the notion, the egregious notion, that they should submit to the guidance of the judge. In this instance, everyone must be reminded that the judge is an employee of the very establishment that wrote the legislation and wishes at all times to get its own way. You hear people say that here in Britain we don't have a written constitution. Anyone making reference to the essential importance of Magna Carta, which is to say Magna Carta 1215, accept no imitations. Anyone even mentioning Magna Carta is quickly derided as a nut and a crank flogging a dead horse. But I say that even if that were true, and it isn't, but even if that were true, that there's no written constitution, down deep where it matters, decent and reasonable people know what's right and true, with or without a constitution, written or otherwise. When Magna Carta was sealed by King John in 1215, it wasn't saying anything new. It was simply restating fundamental truth that already by 1215 was old beyond the reach of memory. We don't have democracy in this country, and we feel it, and it makes us sick. The same friend who gave me the line about voting in elections being little different than mob rule also told me, quote, one of the complaints set out in the American Declaration of Independence of 1776 was that the British Crown was depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. The so-called establishment of today has all but destroyed what serves as our immune system. With smiles on their faces and a superior look, their myrmidons presume to tell us this loss is for the common good, don't they always? If you think the subject of trial by jury is dull, far less irrelevant, then I'm here to tell you that you're dangerously wrong. Freedom of speech is holy. Freedom to do what you want with your own money is holy. Right to privacy is holy. Challenge to despotism, up to and including its overthrow, is not just our right, but the living, breathing obligation of every honest man and woman. Trial by jury, by which we, the people, decide the justice or not of legislation, is our only defence against tyranny. It's our only defence, our immune system, against the cancer of that tyranny. But it's also the only defence we need. Stand up and...
I see the panic on the right, and I raise it one dose of hard truth, the people now wringing their hands over the end of trial. By jury spent the last 30 years cheering every single step that got us here. They clapped when Blair's New Labour rammed through the Criminal Justice Act 2003, cutting unanimous verdicts to 10-2. They nodded when the Tories under Cameron kept the change and piled on terrorism offences that can be heard by a judge alone. They shrugged when the Supreme Court, packed by Tory and Labour governments alike, upheld whole-life orders with no jury review. And now that Sir Brian Leveson has merely put the bureaucratic rubber stamp on what the political class already did, they howl as if some fresh crime has been committed. Spare me. Let me be blunt. The left did not kill the jury. A lazy, slogan-addicted, security-obsessed mainstream did, and the mainstream is not left or right, it is managerial. The same newspapers that now print sick. In-block capitals were the ones that demanded fast-track courts after the 2011 riots, begged for secret evidence in deportation hearings, and told us that pedophiles get off too easily. Every time the tabloids roared lock them up faster, Parliament obliged by carving out another slice of the jury right. If you cheered that chorus, congratulations, you helped dig the grave you now call a coffin. But since the speaker in the clip insists on blaming the modern left, let us test that claim against facts the clip never mentions. The biggest single attack on the jury in the last decade came from the Police, Crime, Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. Who pushed it? Priti Patel, a Tory Home Secretary, backed by Boris Johnson's People's government. The act empowers judges to remove jurors who cause disruption, a term so vague it could cover holding up a blank sheet of paper outside Parliament. Labour MPs voted against the worst parts of the bill, yet almost every Tory MP, including the self-styled libertarian backbenchers, voted it through. If the left is the villain here, why did the right deliver the knife? I will go further. The loudest current push for judge-only trials is coming from the right-wing press itself, howling that left-wing juries refuse to convict climate protesters. The Daily Mail, The Telegraph, and GBNews talking heads have demanded professional panels to replace activist jurors. So when the Leveson report lands, they will swallow it provided it is used against Extinction Rebellion, not against their pet causes. The hypocrisy is suffocating. Still, let us grant the clip one half-truth. The left's legal theorists have indeed spent decades undermining the jury. Critical legal scholars in U.S. and British universities sneer at bourgeois legal formalism and call the jury a white, patriarchal, settler colonial device. They want community panels stacked with activists and bureaucrats. But here is what the clip forgets: those same theorists have zero power unless elected politicians translate their papers into statutes. And the politicians who did that translation were overwhelmingly centrists and self-proclaimed conservatives. I live in Northern Ireland. We have lived without jury trials for scheduled offenses since 1973. That was not Jeremy Corbyn's idea, it was Willie Whitelaw's, a Tory Home Secretary, enacted under a Tory Prime Minister, Edward Heath. The Diplock Court's single judge, no jury were sold to the public as a temporary anti-terror measure. 50 years later, they are still here, now used for drug gangs and tax fraud. Once the precedent is set, the emergency never ends. If the right cared about juries, it would have restored them in Ulster long ago. It never did. Here is another unmentioned fact: the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 6, explicitly guarantees a fair and public hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial tribunal. The Strasbourg Court has repeatedly ruled that serious criminal charges must be tried by jury unless there are compelling reasons. Guess which party promised to scrap the Human Rights Act and pull out of the convention? The same party now claiming to defend ancient liberties. They want to leave the one treaty that still offers a legal shield for jury trial. Let me pivot to Israel, since the speaker drags in perpetual war and loss of freedom. Israel has no constitutional right to jury trial at all. Its legal system is a hybrid of Ottoman, British mandate, and modern statutes. Yet it has produced some of the most robust free speech jurisprudence in the democratic world. Israeli courts acquitted activists who refused military service, struck down censorship orders against newspapers, and protected the right to burn the national flag, all without a single jury. The lesson is not that juries are worthless, it is that culture, courage, and an independent bench can sometimes substitute for the ancient Anglo-Saxon device. If Britain wants to save liberty, it must rebuild a culture that values it, not just fetishize one medieval institution. Now to the Magna Carta worship. The 1215 Charter did not mention juries. Trial by peers meant trial by barons. The petty jury as we know it crystallized centuries later, under judges who feared royal interference. The right evolved through struggle, not parchment magic. Today, the same establishment that waves Magna Carta like a talisman also passes 400-page bills that no MP has read. If we want to restore real accountability, we should start with the principle behind the jury that ordinary citizens, not state employees, have the final say on liberty. That principle can live inside or outside the jury room. It can live in citizen-initiated grand juries, in randomly selected constitutional conventions, in local magistrates elected by parish councils. The right should be pioneering those ideas instead of recycling 1990s tabloid outrage. I close with a warning from the United States. The Sixth Amendment secures jury trial in all criminal prosecutions. Yet 97 of federal convictions now come from plea bargains, never tested before a jury. The right did not stop this. Tough-on-crime conservatives built the machinery: mandatory minimums, sentencing guidelines, coercive plea practices. When the left protested, the right called them soft on crime. Now that same machinery is being turned against Trump supporters who entered the Capitol on 6 January. They are discovering, too late, that the weapon they forged in the 1980s has no owner's manual. So spare me the theatrics about the last nail. The nails were hammered in by bipartisan consensus, each strike sold to the public as a crackdown on the latest folk devil. If we want to pull them out, we need more than nostalgia. We need a movement that demands transparency in plea deals, that caps judge-alone trials to the narrowest offenses, that restores peremptory challenges so citizens can weed out biased jurors, that funds legal aid so defendants can actually mount a defense, that sets maximum page limits on bills so MPs can read what they vote on. These are practical, conservative reforms that a serious right could champion tomorrow. Until then, the outrage rings hollow. The coffin is not being nailed shut by some spectral leftist. It is being carried by a procession in which self-described conservatives bear the front handles. If we do not admit that, we will keep marching to the graveyard, all the while blaming the pallbearers behind us.